Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. I'm Tudor Dixon, and I'm so glad that you are tuning in today because today I am joined by a friend of mine who has given me a lot of grief that a different morning anchor was on before him, and he has complained that the conversation was not interesting for him. So I am excited to have the host of Wake Up America on NEWSMAX, Rob Finnerty, here with me today. Thanks, Rob.
Tudor, great to be with you. I don't know what other morning anchor you could be referring to. Maybe somebody over on Fox who's on really early like I am. No, I thought that podcast was great. I thought you guys talked about bathing your kids for like 45 minutes too long. But I got to admit, I listened to the whole thing, so I was captivated. I was captivated by it.
Look, I think that Todd, he talked about he bathes his kids and it's like a 2-hour process. And I think that a lot of us get sucked into these weird things with our kids where you end up like, you're like, how did this happen that I've made this such a challenge? And I wonder, did our parents do that? You probably are perfect and have never had anything like that happen in your household. But I will admit, I've done some weird things that have taken a long time. Like the tooth fairy is ridiculous at my house and I regret it because there's a lot of teeth.
Yeah. The tooth fairy is a very big deal in our house. In fact, we just went through that. She's delightful, but sometimes, the tooth fairy has to be the person that has to drive into New York to do a morning show. And sometimes the daughter who just lost a tooth actually wakes up in the process. And at 3:30 in the morning, the tooth fairy has to come up with some miraculous excuse why you're in her bedroom at 3:26 a.m. Which affected me the whole day, by the way. And then after I picked her up from school in the afternoon, she said, "Daddy, why were you in my room?" And I said, "Well, I've always wanted to see the real tooth fairy in person." Our tooth fairy's named Tina.
Oh, that's a good one.
So I wanted to see Tina, the tooth fairy, in person. And that's why I was in your room. I was actually in there for a long time, and you just happened to wake up right then at that moment.
Thankfully, my tooth fairy, one thing I did not do was, she doesn't have a name, but my tooth fairy is a nightmare because she writes the kids a note. Why would she do that? Why ever would she do that? Because there are 4 kids, you have a massive amount of teeth. So that is a lot of notes over the years. And she also sprinkles them with fairy dust. And then she has sprinkle fairy dust on the money. And then the money is wrapped up in dental floss. And it is a whole... It was a mistake, a huge, like for all the parents out there listening, if you have younger kids, don't do that because now the tooth fairy, they're like, "Mom, I lost a tooth." And I'm like, "Oh, great." Like my reaction is not like, "Hey, sweetheart, a tooth."
Terrific. No, by the way, and your handwriting, the tooth fairy's handwriting, I noticed is very similar. The tooth fairy now writes in block letters in my house because my daughter is like a stenographer. So she's able to identify any and all handwriting as well. So we've had to work around that. By the way, I know that inflation is high under Joseph Robinette Biden, but my goodness, when I was little, I literally was thrilled if I got a nickel. Those days are over, Tudor. Yeah. Over. Long gone.
Yeah, my kids get $1, and then there are other kids that get $5. And those parents, I feel like you've betrayed us. I just want you to know.
Yeah. Show-offs. That's what they are.
Yes, exactly.
Those are the same people that do full-size candy bars at Halloween. Show-off.
Exactly. Yes, I'm against that too. But I actually prefer that to the people who give out an apple. I'm like, oh, come on.
Yeah, that's no fun at all.
No,
all right?
Not at all.
And that's only going to help you lose more teeth biting into that thing.
Right. Okay, so now we've gotten off of the subjects of like serious stuff, which I actually think is more fun to not talk about serious stuff. But
no, you did this with Todd. You were like, "How long do you bathe your kids?" And I was like, I can relate as a morning person. Like you're fighting the clock all day. That's what you did. You were like, "So tell us about bathing your children." And he was like, "Well,
that sounds really creepy."
Yeah. No, that was the subject of the podcast that day.
That did come up, but I did not like ask that. Okay, whatever. So anyway, moving on. Rob is giving me grief because I do love being on the show with you. When I go to New York, I try to always spend a lot of time on your show, and it is a lot of fun. And you are a lot of fun to be around, but you are also sometimes you're serious. I actually think that you're joking a lot of the time, though. I will say, what is that like when you're on air? Because I think that you like to bring a little bit of fun, and you have to because it's a morning show. So I guess from that standpoint, you have to be a little bit fun, right? I mean, you're not just faking it.
I think if as long as you're like read up and you know what you're talking about, everyone's a little punch drunk at that time of day. And I will say, the first time you came in, I was like, wow, like Tudor Dixon's going to be in studio, like doing panels with us. All our panels are unscripted, as you know. And the topics that we send you, 80% of the time are not the stuff. That's not what we're going to end up talking about on the show. But I know that you can handle it. So I'm always really comfortable when I know you're going to be in-house, because I know that you can roll with the punches and we can talk about anything. But I will admit, I was a little intimidated before the first. Remember how serious I was the first time I met you?
Yeah.
I was like, Tudor, hi, Robert James Finnerty. Pleasure. Sarah, nice to meet you as well. Welcome. Can we get you a coffee? I was very, very serious. And now that's just gone out the window every time you come in.
Right. Now it's just like, I'm like just one of the people that shines your shoes, right? It's like, Tudor, just sit over there.
I will admit.
Don't get her the nice chair.
We'll get to you. I have to tub my kids. Give me a minute. Okay.
All right, but it is fun, and I mean, the news is your thing. You've been in the news for a while, and you have fun doing it, which I love, because I think it's really important when you're talking about serious subjects to bring in some levity. I got in trouble for that during the campaign because some people don't like people that want to be funny, but you are serious at times, and there are some very serious things going on right now. So I wanted to dig into something that I've wanted to dig into on the podcast for a while, but there really hasn't been the right person to do that. So I thought that you would be the right person to dig into something pretty serious. And that is what is going on in Ukraine from multiple different aspects right now, because we all remember talking about this in 2018, 2019, when you see that suddenly Trump pulls back the ambassador, Marie Yovanovitch, if I'm saying that correctly. He pulls her back, and everybody starts to say, well, this is a woman who has dedicated her life to serving the country. She's been ambassador to a few different places. Now she's ambassador to Ukraine. He sent her there because he was actually concerned that there was corruption, and that corruption was somehow connected to the Biden family. And then he said, I think that you've been corrupted by these people, and I'm bringing you back. And the whole world was kind of turned upside down, where it's like this Ukraine call. He's trying to investigate his political opponent. He knows that Joe Biden is running. He's trying to stop him from running. It was all over the news. Now, here we are, fast forward to today. Suddenly it comes out that there's a really good chance that he was actually taking bribes from Ukrainian officials to the tune of maybe $10 million to the family, the Biden family, 5 to him alone. And there is no news coverage on the mainstream media that is the leftist mainstream media coming out and saying, wow, this is pretty shady. Trump was impeached over questioning this, and now we're seeing that it quite likely happened.
Yeah. We were just talking about this in one of our pre-show meetings. This is why I think networks like NEWSMAX, like Fox, look, this submarine story, this tragedy in the North Atlantic with this sub that was, lost down by the Titanic, that's dominating a lot of the news right now. But I think it is stories like this. This is why this justifies our existence. This is why we exist, because the rest of the media will not talk about it. So I looked back at the transcript of remember Trump called it the perfect call, perfect phone call. They impeached him in the House for this. I mean, this is that crazy. And he didn't say anything. It really was, whether you like Trump or not, I encourage you, the transcript's like a page and a half long. Look back at what was actually said between he and President Zelensky in Ukraine. And now you fast forward the clock a few years, and Ukraine has been at war with Russia. And this war it's been incredibly corrupt. We have no accounting for where all the money has been spent. But Donald Trump just said, and fine, it looked like Joe Biden. At that time, Joe Biden was not the leading Democratic candidate for the nomination. But Donald Trump said, look, it looks like there's some corruption with the Biden family. I'm not excluding Joe Biden from this conversation. With Hunter Biden and Joe, the big guy, it looks like there might be some corruption. It might be something that you guys want to look into a little bit. And Trump didn't say anything untoward. The House impeached him for that. And to your point now, fast forward the clock 4 years, and it looks like Donald Trump was right again. And it looks like the rest of the media doesn't care about that. And impeaching a president is not a little thing. And they impeached him for this. They impeached him over this issue.
But so you say that, and I would say that that's not a little thing for you as a news person, as a host of a show, to come out and say it looks like Donald Trump was right, because instead of the fact checkers coming out and saying, holy cow, Rob Finnerty read this, and this is really actually true. Now, hindsight is 2020, but now we have a whole lot more information that has come to light of exactly what this situation is. But for you to come out and say that when everybody on the other side wants to say Trump was not right, he was rightfully impeached, it's hard to be in that position because a lot of people come out to attack you, don't they?
So I've always said this: if you work in conservative media, and I think that NEWSMAX is to the right, absolutely. But I always ask people if they watch NEWSMAX before they tell me what their opinion is about NEWSMAX. I get that a lot. People are like, "Aren't you guys like all crazy heretics over there?" And I'm like, "Have you watched NEWSMAX?" Because no, I just think if everybody's going in one direction, Tudor, and you know this as a politician who ran for office, if everybody's going in one direction, somebody's got to go in the other direction. If you only heard one story about, it's the lima bean argument. If somebody told you that lima beans are great every single day for your entire life, you might hate them at first, but over time, that drip, drip, drip is going to play a role in how you think about them. And you're going to say, well, maybe lima beans aren't so bad. Look, it's the same thing with the way news stories are covered in the media right now. And this situation with Hunter Biden, the plea deal that he's going to take 2 misdemeanors and a felony. This is not yesterday. It broke after we got off the air, which is so frustrating because I love when that stuff happens when we're on the air. You've been on the show, and it's like all of a sudden we get to have the first take,
right,
the first crack at some big story like that, which is, one of the reasons I love morning news. But yesterday, and I'm watching this at home, and my wife's just exhausted hearing it in the other room because I've got the TV on all day, and I'm watching CNN and MSNBC and every other network.
Because you have to know you have to know what in some cases the crazy take, but also I just think it's good to hear what the other side is thinking. So you have a way of discussing it. I mean, we used to be a country that discussed things.
Yeah, no, it's journalistic oppo research. I have to know what they're saying on CNN. It really is. And I think, people, there's a lot of arrogance in journalism. People will say, I went to Syracuse in the Newhouse School. And I'm like, I would have gone there. I applied. They didn't accept me. Okay. I graduated in the top half of the bottom third of my class, but I still made it because journalism, like so many industries, and I'll lump politics into that, it is a trade. You learn on the job. You don't learn in the classroom. It's a trade. So this stuff with Hunter Biden, I'm watching these reporters for CNN and MSNBC yesterday celebrating a sitting president's son agreeing to plea to a felony, 1 felony charge with this gun charge, and then 2 misdemeanors for not paying his taxes. And not a soul is asking where the money came from. And I'm sitting there on my couch at home looking forward to the kids getting home from camp so we can tub. And I'm wondering why... The whole podcast, I'm going to weave that in.
I know.
But I'm wondering.
The fact is that it's just so
media...
creepy too, and that's the part that I think is funny because it's just very creepy. All right, keep going.
That's going to be your number 1 downloaded podcast, by the way. That one,
right?
now,
exactly.
Because of this podcast. Yeah.
This is going to be a Democrat oppo research for sure. Like all she talks about is putting kids in the tub.
Yeah, totally. And I'm at home and I'm wondering how the rest of the media is not asking these very basic questions.
Because they don't but even that, so I would argue that you see it from a very obvious standpoint. Why aren't they asking the obvious questions? But why aren't they asking their typical questions, which is like, how did this white guy not how is he not facing jail time? How is this white guy just getting off? Is this some sort of a privilege? Is he privileged because of who he knows? Is the government corrupt? This is all the stuff that they would have said if it were any Republican and some other Democrats as well, they would go after. But why is Joe Biden the guy that can do anything? Always. I mean, you've got Joe Biden, you've got Fetterman. The Fetterman situation, I think, is very sad. So I don't feel sad about Joe Biden having dementia because the man has been incredibly corrupt. He's an old guy and they're using him to continually corrupt our country. And I don't trust the fact that he potentially got millions of dollars from Ukraine and is suddenly giving them billions of dollars. And his children who have received a lot of this money, they don't have dementia. And so I don't feel bad about that. I do feel bad for John Fetterman because I think that he suffered a catastrophic stroke at a very young age and people in the Democrat Party are using him. And I don't think I'm not 100% confident that he understands that he should step down. But maybe I'm wrong about that. The Biden family, the corruption runs very deep, all the way to the grandchildren.
Yeah, no, such a good point. And just to John Fetterman this week, he's in Philly and he's talking about that bridge collapse on I-95. He made Joe Biden look like Winston Churchill. Joe Biden was standing next to him there. And you wonder, with Joe Biden, I think that there's some elder abuse with Dr. Jill, who got an EED in education from the University of Delaware online, and now we've all got to call her doctor. With John Fetterman, I don't know why his wife Giselle would allow him. This poor guy, look, medically speaking, after the first 6 months, recovery is extremely slow when somebody suffers a stroke like he did. And you look at this guy, and he's now representing one of the biggest states in the country, one of the most important states. And there were other candidates. You look at Democrat Connor Lamb, young guy, a little bit more moderate. And elections have consequences. We hear that all the time. But then you look at what's going on in Pennsylvania, and you scratch your head. And I wonder why, when people like Gavin Newsom are waiting in the wings, why the media is still protecting Joe Biden.
Okay, all right. I have a theory on that. You can tell me what you think about my theory. My theory is that they won't have anybody running against Gavin Newsom until the very end. They protected Gavin Newsom from all of the criticisms. Right now, he is just getting glowing media. He goes on Hannity. He gets to talk about things, and he looks the part. He's a handsome guy. He's got everything. He's a very smooth talker. He can make California look like a paradise when it's really hell on earth. You've got the zombie apocalypse in half of the cities, but he is getting this glowing attention right now. And the Democrats are all going, no, Joe is still our candidate. Joe is still our candidate. So he gets none of the arrows until the very end, when I suspect that they say, you know what, he's had a medical emergency. Something's happened. The guy has to go out to the nursing home. Something's going to happen where they're going to take Joe. But the reason they don't want to do it now is they don't want the next team, which I believe will be a Newsom-Whitmer team, to be tarnished. And they don't want to take him out now, or they would have to say it's Kamala.
Tudor, where was that take on Wake Up America?
You don't let me talk long enough, Rob. You treat me like
I know. Well, no, it's true. We don't have a ton of time. Our panels are totally unscripted. We have like 12 minutes, but it's you got to keep the train rolling down the tracks. I have not thought about that. That's a really good. Look at Joe Biden yesterday in California. Biden's asked a question about Hunter, and you see who's sitting right next to him? Gavin Newsom, Governor Good Looking, sitting right there next to him on stage. And I think that's deliberate. I haven't thought about that, but that makes sense. Keep Newsom and Whitmer, whomever he runs with, hermetically sealed until it becomes clear that Joe Biden can't be the guy 16 months from now in 2024, and then roll out the Newsom campaign. And Newsom is running a shadow campaign right now. And you know who he's running against? Is Ron DeSantis.
Yes.
And DeSantis, he released an ad on Monday, a campaign ad spot where he is targeting Gavin Newsom. And I'm asking myself, wait a second, what does the DeSantis team know that the rest of us don't know? Because right now there's a 20-point spread between he and Donald Trump for the nomination. But we all know when it comes to primaries, it's all about Iowa, the caucus, New Hampshire, a primary. It's all about individual states and not national polls. So maybe the DeSantis team knows something that we don't know, but that's really odd that he's running and campaigning against a guy who hasn't even announced that he's running for president.
Well, Gavin Newsom. I think it's very interesting that you have Gavin Newsom out there putting all of these ads. He puts an ad out that's a presidential ad. It says great things. He goes on Fox, so he can clip that and use that in an ad where he's going to go after independents and say, look, I'm talking to the other side and I'm telling them how great California is. There's never an argument. He's very cool and collected. And you've got him coming out and saying, I'm going to put Ron DeSantis in jail. Like, this guy's a kidnapper. He's a bad guy. So people who think that Donald Trump is the only one who's ever going to be attacked and the only one who's going to be charged with things and that he's really genuinely a bad guy that deserves these indictments, that's happening to every Republican from now on unless we fight back and stop it. And I really believe that the reason a lot of people are saying Donald Trump has to fight back so hard right now is because it's Ron DeSantis next. It's Tim Scott. It's every Republican who's ever going to think about becoming a senator or the president. They're going to be talked about as a criminal.
Yeah. And DeSantis, by the way, he sat down. I think it was Hannity, right? A couple of weeks ago. And I remember watching the interview and saying, good for Gavin Newsom. I don't like his policies. I didn't agree with a lot of what he was saying. But here's a guy who was sitting there with no notes, and they're having an hour-long conversation. And you look at Joe Biden, and he can't get through a speech on the teleprompter. He can't get through a speech when he's got notes. He doesn't take questions from the media, and yet the media continues to be. This God Save the Queen thing last Friday when he said that, the media is writing. Axios said this, and I just wrote it down. Biden has an arsenal of wacky phrases that are weaponized by Republicans to insinuate that Biden is in mental decline. The media is still, no matter what, they're going to defend this guy. And it's like, I'm sorry, this guy is not on the level. Dr. Jill, is that elder abuse? How can you allow your 80-year-old husband to do that? You wouldn't let Joe Biden, you wouldn't trust him to deliver the mail. All right. If he was your 80-year-old grandfather, you'd take away the keys. Okay. You wouldn't trust him to babysit your kids or your grandkids. Yet this guy's tasked with leading the free world right now.
And you see her face when she is trying to guide him. He's always walking the wrong direction. And then you see Jill grab his hand and pull him back. I mean, she knows she's in this for something because she knows that he has to be controlled at all times. I thought it was interesting that she didn't go to Ireland with him. You have to question, is there a point when she's just like, I just can't take it anymore? But even that, he comes back and he's like, I can't remember where I was last. And you hear this tiny little child's voice, Ireland. Like, wait a minute.
We're in Ireland, Mr. President. That kid sounded Irish, by the way, the little kid who said that. No, I don't think, and by the way, he was in Ireland with Hunter. Hunter was working the rope line. And, I think that was part of this, we're going to rehab Hunter because we know the DOJ is going to give him this little foot massage of a plea deal, which nobody else. We had the former attorney general on the show this morning. And I just asked him flat out. I said, listen, you were a prosecutor for years and years before you got to the AG's office. Doesn't a gun charge, a plea to a gun felony typically come with some kind of time behind bars? And he was like, not most of the time, all the time, every time. In fact, I can't think of a case when there wasn't at least a 30, 60, or 90-day sentence attached to a plea like that. But not when your last name is Biden.
But why are we ignoring the fact that his laptop is filled with horrific images of him? There's weird things with kids. There's drugs. He's naked all the time. He's got prostitutes. Like David Marcus tweeted out, I've smoked everything there is, and I've done all kinds of drugs. And he said, even me, when I would see the rich dude smoking crack, would take a step back and go, this is somebody that was smoking crack, and we're not going, yeah, this is a problem that somehow this prostitute loving, crack smoking, baby abandoning man has somehow been granted a position at a Ukrainian oil company, even though he knows nothing about that. And nobody's going, nothing. This is pure and evil corruption from the Biden family.
Yeah. And the media yesterday is celebrating that this is, case closed when it comes to Hunter Biden. And I'm like, no, hold on. Never before in our country's history has a sitting president had a son who's pled out to not one misdemeanor, but two, but also a felony. So we're in historic territory. I remember when George W. Bush was president, I was just getting out of college. George W. Bush is president, and we'd hear stories about Jenna and her twin sister, like underage drinking.
Right,
that was that was the big thing. Underage drinking. On that laptop, check out what Hunter Biden used to do with M&Ms. All right, I'll leave it there. But the man could do remarkable things with M&Ms. Yeah, we're talking about this guy is not a good guy. And you bring up his daughter there in
remarkable,
Arkansas.
I feel like that's a pretty extreme word for that. That is,
maybe remarkable is not. I don't want to say impressive either. But, I had John Paul Mac Isaac. He was the guy that Hunter gave the laptop to at the Mac shop there in Wilmington. And he mentioned that during the interview. He was like, and he can do amazing things with M&Ms. And I hadn't seen that part of the laptop. And I gave that a quick Google. And I was,
and then you regretted that.
What a parlor trick that is, Hunter Biden. And you think about the treatment that the Trump kids got. And I know nobody likes to hear that. And I don't like the whataboutism, what if Trump were in office and this, all things being equal, if Eric were charged with the same stuff. It's totally ridiculous. And I just, at this point, it's not like Joe Biden is, this transcendent Obama-esque, Kennedy-esque politician. He's Joe Biden. Why are they still protecting him? There are other candidates that are more qualified. in the Democratic Party
and
that are better candidates.
And the funny, I was
better people.
watching a video of him the other day when he was first sworn in as a senator. And, he was the youngest senator. So he was 30. He wasn't even old enough to be a senator when he was running. And when he won his election, not until he was sworn in was he old enough to actually be the senator. And all the news at the time was like, Joe Biden is making news for his age. This is a record and blah, blah. And I'm like, that's funny because he's still making news for his age. And think about the time that has gone past, that he has been in government his entire life. And it's funny because they said, well, you're not corrupt. And he said, how do you know I'm not corrupt? He may not have been at 30, but I think that it takes a very special person to withstand the pressures of being corrupt in government, I think. I mean, there are so many different ways for people to scam something, make money here, have a deal behind the scenes there. And this is a man who's done this for longer than almost anybody.
Yeah, look at Mitch McConnell. Look at Nancy Pelosi. These are people that are career politicians. Nancy Pelosi's worth more than $100 million. I mean, I think the congressional salary, I think it's $174,000. It might be a little over $200,000 now, but either way, I mean, that's how does that equal $100 million? It's Joe Biden. I think it's always one of the things I thought was funny about Joe Biden. So he's elected Nixon's president. So to your point, that's how long Joe Biden's been in elected office. And this is not ageism. This is not like a chronological age thing. It's the fact that like with Joe Biden, the cheese slipped off the cracker a long time ago. All right. Like he just doesn't have his marbles.
Right.
But Biden, as a freshman senator, was the first senator to endorse Jimmy Carter. And now we hear about all the Carter-Biden comparisons. Jimmy Carter's still alive. I think if I'm Jimmy Carter, I'm like, whoa, don't compare me to Joe Biden. I was a much better president than Joe Biden has been.
Do you ever see that picture of him with the Carters where they look like very tiny people?
It's like a giant. What is that? What is that picture?
That was really...
I know you atrophy a little bit when you get older, but like Biden looked like he could have eaten. It looked like it was like a Lord of the Rings scene. I didn't know what that was. Yeah.
Why did they release that? Nobody really talked about how weird it was, but it was really, if you have not seen the picture of them together, you have to Google it because the Carters look like tiny little people and the Bidens look like giants.
Like the Carters look like marionettes, like something you'd like. It's like very bizarre, and I don't know why the guy with the cell phone wasn't like, "Hey, Mr. President, can you guys just let's retake that?" Okay?
Yes, this is a weird angle here. You look like giants, but it's very cute. I mean,
yes. Well, Jimmy and Rosalind are very.
They
cute,
are very cute. Yes.
Heart. In their mid-90s, still together.
Yeah, I'm sure someone thinks the Bidens are cute, but not right now.
Yes.
And it does. Just before I let you go, think about the times that we're in. I mean, we've gone through what he's lived through alone, which is more than either of us have lived through. But what he's lived through, and then now to see where the country is with China partnering up with Russia. And this is something we just talked about on one of our podcasts, is people really are not understanding the danger of China having this much power and China using this power to team up with Russia. And he is compromised with both. Yeah,
he's not somebody that, and I think when I was growing up, you always think that like the president is surrounded by the best minds, the best and the brightest.
And then they rob people at the airport and you're like, eh.
Yeah, I mean, you get to see the other side of the looking glass, and Tudor, I don't know about you, but it's frightening, and I think that the majority, and as it should be, but the majority of people in America just live their lives, and they're happy doing that, and they're happy maybe even deliberately not knowing how inadequate the people who pull the levers of power really are. You think about Joe Biden and his cabinet, Antony Blinken a couple days ago, with President Xi in China, and just the optics of little Antony Blinken walking over to President Xi and shaking his hand on his home turf. Just this, it just looks so weak to me. And then everybody in the delegation, the American delegation, being asked to wear a mask and then wearing a mask. If I was over there and they told me we would like you to wear a mask before the meeting, I'd say that's great. I'm not going to wear a mask before the meeting. I don't think Mike Pompeo would. And then you look at somebody like Pete Buttigieg, right? I don't think Mayor Pete is really the most qualified person to be our transportation secretary. And then you look at Alejandro Mayorkas at the southern border, and then you look at our vice president, and then it goes all the way to the top. And let's say that China does invade Taiwan. Russia's already invaded Ukraine. Let's say China does invade Taiwan. Do you really trust that Joe Biden is capable of making decisions appropriate and that are really in America's best interest? I do not, and it's frightening.
No,
it really is frightening.
No, I do not either. And I think that as you see all of these people who are going over there and you see Blinken, who is treated so poorly. I mean, he was told at the last minute, you actually do get to see President Xi. But then why is one of the largest Democrat donors able to go over there and sit down with him? Bill Gates gets a meeting, an actual one-on-one meeting with him to talk about the future. And we know that American manufacturing is very tied into China, and that's a major part of our problem is that everything that we're buying is coming from China. It's very dangerous times.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know if Ukraine, a couple months ago, I can remember talking with candidates about the Ukraine war, and they were like, well, we've still got at that time 20 months until 2024. I don't know if this will be a part of the conversation. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, are you kidding me? The war in Ukraine is not going away. It's not going anywhere. This will be a part of the conversation in 2024. And I think all these candidates should be prepared to talk about it because it should play a role. And I think that RFK Jr. is smart to talk about it because he points out what's going on to Democrats, and it puts the Washington Post and the New York Times and all these legacy Democratic left-leaning newspapers and reporters and media outlets. It puts them in the position to have to discredit a Kennedy, which is just like ironic in and of itself.
It's funny because they're afraid of him, but he would be their best weapon against any Republican because even though he is a radical liberal, Republicans somehow do not see that. It's like when Tulsi Gabbard was running and everybody was like, she is one of us. And she still has very liberal policies. He is someone with very liberal policies. People say, well, Tulsi's now a Republican. No, she is just no longer a Democrat. But I think if you're the Democrats, you're not getting behind RFK because you think of him as a threat. But honestly, he has snowed a lot of conservative voters into saying, oh, he doesn't like vaccines. He doesn't like homelessness. He's our guy too. I just caution people, make sure you know exactly who someone is, but I don't think the Democrats are going to let him go anywhere anymore.
Can I ask you one question? Just, I like your Gavin Newsom. I haven't thought about that, so I like that. Do you think that a serious Democrat does get into this race to run against Joe Biden? Because RFK Jr. is polling at 20% and the guy can't even speak. What happens if somebody, and I'm serious, the guy, he has a throat condition, I get it, right? But we're not talking about one of the great orators in political history. All right, he's not his uncle, he's not his father, he has this throat condition. What if a serious candidate gets in? What if Gavin Newsom gets in? What if Tulsi Gabbard, a serious Democrat actually gets into the race? Do you think that happens?
They won't. That's why they've strategically given them all roles in the re-election. So like if you look at Governor Whitmer, she is the co-chair of the Biden campaign. She is the vice chair of the DNC. I don't know what titles that Gavin Newsom holds, but they are held, all of those very serious Democrats are held in their place until the establishment says, it's your turn, now you're up to bat. They wait. They wait strategically because they have a long-term plan. And Republicans that's a whole nother conversation. We have to get into what Republicans are doing that is totally opposite of what Democrats are doing that is causing us to lose and them to win. And they are just like lapping it up. And they're like, come on, bring it on. We figured out the system. And the Republicans are still arguing over whether or not we're going to vote on one day, which is not happening.
Yeah. And you look at Republicans, at least, when it comes to presidential electoral history, you look at John McCain, 2008, Mitt Romney, 2008, probably not our best candidates. I do think right now Republicans have maybe the strongest bench of my lifetime. And if it's not Donald Trump, I still think that Republicans will be in good hands. And I know that you don't expect to hear that from a NEWSMAX anchor, and I get it all the time, but Republicans have a very, very strong bench, and I think that's a good thing. Hopefully they can deploy it differently than they have in recent history.
Yeah, I agree. We'll see, we talked a little bit outside of, activities with the children.
Are we already done?
I've taken up a lot of your time now. Yeah, we are. So you're going to have to come back and finish talking about the whole, because that is
definitely come back.
That is a very interesting conversation to me, is what Democrats are doing and what Republicans are doing and why we're losing, and we could potentially lose again. if we don't change.
Yeah. And it's not just, I know they say 18, 20, 22, but Republicans have been losing for a long time. If you take out the Bush presidency, this has not been a good 30 plus years for the GOP in the House, the Senate, or in the Oval Office. So something needs to change.
Right. But the fact that we're winning anything means that our policies really are the right policies, because people are hearing it, but they're not hearing it enough because our strategies are way different and they're just very off.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you.
All right. We're going to have you back. Thank you so much.
Tough time.
Tough
time.
He is the host of Wake Up America on NEWSMAX. Make sure you check out his show every morning. Rob Finnerty, thank you.
Thanks, Tudor. Appreciate it.
And thank you all for joining me on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. As always, for this episode and others, go to TudorDixonPodcast.com. You can subscribe right there or check out iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure you join us the next time on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Have an awesome day.